My story, the best way to tell my story is essentially to start, as a child. I grew up pretty much like every Canadian kid. I dreamed of playing hockey, and I wanted to be a firefighter. And fortunate enough for me, I really excelled at hockey. It was something that I was able to take pretty far. At the age of 15, I was drafted in the Western Hockey League. I'm assuming most of you guys are from the East here, so that's the OHL and the Q and things like that out there. Started playing in the Western Hockey League. Things were just going fantastic. I was ranked to go in the NHL draft, and I started running into some concussion issues. And ultimately, things just started to go on the decline for me as far as my playing goes. And I ended up getting traded to another team here in the Western League. And at our home opener, I just took an absolutely vicious hit from behind and had ended up with, I couldn't even tell you how many concussions. I'm dating myself back, but I mean, this was back in the 90s when, it was pretty much you just said you got your bell rung, and I had my life, and I had missing about 2 weeks of my life after that hit. I actually had so much swelling inside my head that I started going blind. And ultimately, my neurologist called my career for me. And as any of you guys can probably imagine, going through and dedicating yourself to something like that, especially at such a young age, it was a pretty devastating thing to have happen, especially considering I had the skills and had what it took to make a career out of this. And ultimately, I ended up getting into my sort of first reinvention with the direction that my life went. I dealt with a lot of post-concussion syndrome and sort of had to cross that bridge and get over that hurdle. And ultimately, I got down to thinking, and I went, well, if I can't play hockey for a living, what am I going to do? And I went straight to firefighting. It was like, that was sort of my second dream when I was a kid. And I mean, like I said, what kid doesn't dream of being a firefighter? So, off I went on this journey, and, ended up getting accepted into fire school. And out here, that was a little bit more of a difficult job. They took maybe about 60 firefighters a year to go through your full EST course. I was fortunate enough to get accepted into that, and went to fire school, finished top of my class, met my now wife while I was going to school there. And we ended up moving out to Calgary. And then in September of 2005, we'd been married for about 2 months. I was working out at a fire job just out east of Calgary, and on my off tour days, I was doing some road construction. And I was back in one of those large road packers up the hill. So for those of you that don't know what that is, I mean, they're those big things with the steel drums on the front, pack the thing down. Sort of Bugs Bunny gets run over by them all the time. Again, date myself a little bit. He pops back up. Unfortunately, the way mine went, I didn't. As I was backing this piece of machinery up this road, up a big hill, it malfunctioned. And it slipped out of gear, and I started going back down the road at about 5:20 p.m. And, in Calgary, at probably one of the busier intersections in Calgary. Unfortunately for me, this piece of machinery never should have been on the road. Had a big hole in the hydraulic brake line. So I had zero brakes to try and stop this 75,000 pound piece of machinery. I tried, we were working in the median, I tried running it into the concrete. Unfortunately for me, I actually jumped up on the road, and which just caused me to pick up more speed. And as I was sort of getting closer to this intersection, I ultimately had a choice. I could have jumped off the packer there, and, I would have had a few probably bumps, few bruises, things like that. But that piece of machinery would have went into a horribly busy intersection, and I can't imagine the devastation that it would have caused. And my other option was to try and get it back into the median where we were working. By the time or where I was on the road now, that was about a 3-foot drop into the median. So I decided to get it back into the median, and I got it back in there. And just as I went to jump off, it hit a dirt pile and flipped and landed on me. And, it was it was absolutely, there aren't words to describe it. I was conscious through the whole thing. I was a trained firefighter, so obviously knew the medical side of things, and I knew I was in really rough shape. And ultimately, finally I was lucky. I had a trauma nurse coming home from Foothills Hospital, which is not too far down the road from there. And she was my guardian angel that day. She jumped out of her car with her trauma bag and basically got the bleeding under control. They loaded me up in an ambulance. And basically at this point, I had lost a tremendous amount of blood. And I told the ambulance drivers, I was just, tell my wife I love her. And I passed out. I thought that was the end of it for me. And fortunate enough for me, they got me to the hospital, and in a life-saving surgery, they ended up having to amputate my right knee above my right leg above the knee. So, I went from being a guy that was at the, really sort of pinnacle of things. I was an ex-athlete, I was a firefighter, and all of a sudden here I am laying in a hospital bed, and them telling me that, they've amputated my leg, and I instantly had to start living my life as somebody with a disability, and like I said, going from somebody that was very active and doing every sport under the sun to having to, wonder how you're going to get to the washroom, just pretty much having everything sort of stripped away from you in that sense, was a really tough thing to have happen. And this is part of the big perspective thing that Orlando talked about, looking back on it now, and you guys are going to hear this, a little bit more through my story. Out of all the badness that happened that day, I only have one regret. And that one regret that I have from that day is I was never able to find the nurse that helped save my life. Out of the accident and everything that happened after that, it was a lot of years of medication and rehab and you name it. It took me a long time to get myself readjusted. And as you guys can imagine, that you start digging yourself into a pretty dark hole pretty quick with that. Matt and Orlando can probably attest to this. When you have that sort of sport mentality, and it's an always move forward, and there's almost no excuses. It became very detrimental for me in my recovery, because I actually got to the point where, and I know we have Paul in here. Nancy's talked a lot about you, Paul. And I know that, and same with Orlando. You guys are gonna understand this. When you're going through rehab, and you have all these you're going on this massive incline going up, and all of a sudden you sort of hit a plateau, and that plateau stays for a little while. And for me, with the way that my accident happened, it stayed for a long while. And when I wasn't making that forward progress anymore, I'd been raised, I moved away from home really early, and I'd been raised to sort of kick my own ass. And then kicking my own ass became more detrimental. And ultimately for me, and this sounds really cliche, is my fire instructor sent me an email one day. And you see these motivational quotes everywhere, and sayings and phrases. And, he sent me this one, and I don't know why, but it absolutely just clicked. And it was, scars should remind you of where you've been. They shouldn't dictate where you go. And I sat there and just went, I'm going to swear, I just went, holy shit. This is exactly what I'm doing. I'm letting these physical scars and these mental scars from my accident dictate the direction of my life. And it was sort of from that point that I decided I was just gonna, I was gonna find what made me happy again, and start actively work at moving forward in my life, opposed to letting other people dictate and letting, my scars dictate what was going to happen. And for me, getting that sense of normality back was getting back into sport. I first sport I tried was golfing. I did really well at it, played in the Canadian National Amputee Open, and things just kept going. You guys are going to figure out I'm very accident prone. It's so I went from golfing, I got into paracycling, I ended up blowing my knee out. So a few knee surgeries later, I got back into, we were talking about earlier, I was the first Canadian to buy a sport leg for snowboarding. So, got back out and really started to reinvent myself that way and find ways to do these things. And I know a lot of you guys on here are a little bit younger. I mean, this was all sort of happening in the early 2000s where we didn't have things like YouTube. You had to go out and actively find these things and learn how to do these things yourself. There wasn't sort of foot you all do these things. All you have to learn your own. And things just kept getting better and better for me as I quit letting my life being dictated by, the negativities in my life. And ultimately in 2011, I got back what my passion was, is I found sledge hockey. Had another former WHLer out here who was playing on the Canadian national team at that time, bring me out to a World Sledge Challenge. And it was that holy shit moment. It's a sport that's just absolutely insane. I know Matt's seen it before. Violent is a very apt word for it. They're giving you sticks with picks on the end. You have weapons in your hand, essentially.
Really?
It's quite the craziness. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I implore you to go and watch it. We got guys that are shooting the puck 85 miles an hour with one hand. We're doing laps, and I think the fastest guy on the sledge team now does a lap in just right around 17 seconds. It's a pretty remarkable thing to see. But ultimately that made, I really started making huge progress at that point. I sat in a sled for the first time in November of 2011. And by January 2012, I was in our national program. And things just continued to move forward for me in that sense. And then I was given an amazing opportunity. My fire instructor called me up. He'd become the chief of our MD where I live. And he asked me if I wanted to be a firefighter again. And obviously it was a resounding yes. It was something that, I wanted to do. And it was, out of all the things that I went through, that was arguably probably one of the hardest things that I had to do, because there was nobody that had done it before me. And you want to talk about perceptions and things like that. Me and Nancy had a good talk about this. Most people see somebody with one leg or a disability in that sense, and you automatically sort of get discounted, or you're put into this, group already. And going into the fire industry as a group of a lot of alpha males would be the best way to put it. And it was a journey that was extremely hard, but extremely rewarding. And I was fortunate enough. I was able to do it, and I was able to become the first above-knee amputee firefighter in North America. So it was something I take a great deal of pride in. And from there, I continued to move forward. And as I was going through my hockey career, I really started getting back out and helping people with disabilities, and finding ways that how sport helped me. I was finding it was able to help out so many more people. And ultimately, in 2017, I blew my shoulder out for the second time and ended up having to retire from our national team, and was able to transition into some coaching. I was able to start up a hockey school here in Calgary that is completely free for people with disabilities. So I'm able to get people back out and, get them on the ice and enjoying sport. I've been fortunate enough to be able to start up a foundation that helps people get adaptive equipment. It's something that, really sort of goes under the radar. And, I know Paul will be able to attest to this. It's not as simple as going out and buying a kid a pair of basketball shoes and a basketball. You're going out where it's going to make what might cost you $100 or $150. You're going out and buying a basketball and a $4,000 wheelchair, and it's very sport specific that way. Or, you're buying a $10,000 running leg, or, it's really crazy how all that just sort of adds up. And like I said, it really goes under the radar. And then I've been fortunate enough, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Humboldt Bronco crash, the bus crash that happened. I've been able to help mentor some of their players, more specifically Ryan Straczynski, and this is where I met Matt. We were fortunate enough to come out and train with Matt last summer. And it's such an amazing feeling to be able to impart your knowledge and really help mentor people. And I mean, we've just been able to expand the network of the people that we've been able to help. You know, we've now got an exercise company going called Rubber Recon, where you know, we're able to get people with disabilities sport, you know, workout equipment through workout bands and things like that, so that they can go and be active at home. You know, so it's, as you can tell, I mean, there's been a lot of reinvention that's happened in my life. And you know, there's ultimately, you know, like Orlando said, it's all about perception, and it's all about finding that silver lining in things. And you know, when I look at my story as a whole, it's very funny, because that one day that happened back in 2005 actually has allowed me to live my two childhood dreams at the same time. I was able to wear my, you know, my country's jersey and be a firefighter at the same time, you know, and that all resulted from a day that most people would look at and just, you know, wouldn't want that day ever, right? And if, you know, you ask me now, and I have been asked this question, I honestly wouldn't change anything. You know, I have two beautiful kids. They don't know any different. I'm able to go out there and do everything I can with them. I'm able to be I'm able to be a husband and a father. And you know, it's like I said, it's all about perception and how you want to look at things. And you're just, if you have that way of doing it and you're able to just move forward, you know, like nothing's impossible in this world.